you. I was just relying on you to get the information right. Because,
so straightforward, really.
Because that's kind of what producers do, I think. Anyway, it's very nice to see you all again, by the way. Particularly Holly and particularly Matt.
So ruining particularly the...
That's right, that's rendering the word utterly useless. Timing's all gone now. Bill sends in today's confession. I've changed his name for reasons that will become obvious. Dear St. Simon, Monsignor Matt and Holy Holly, today's confession regarding foolhardy schoolboys out on a playing field, this is from a couple of weeks ago, prompted me, nay compelled me, to finally unburden myself of a grievous sporting sin, which I've never admitted to anyone, not even my Catholic priest. I must take you back some 30 years when I was very much the star of a mid-level rugby team in the north of England. I'm afraid I can't be more geographically precise than that, because although I beg forgiveness, I doubt any ex-teammates hearing this would ever forgive. Indeed, all these years on, retribution could still be both painful and, worse, humiliating. I say I was the star man, speedy and skillful outside back, the team goal kicker and top try scorer, at least since our previously regarded star man had gone to play in Australia. Our team was having a stellar season and was in a cup semi-final when the aforementioned Mr. Previous returned from his season down under, where he repeatedly reminded us all that he'd gold-kicked them all the way to a grand final. It may well be that you can identify who this person is. Anyway, was I jealous? Well, I consider myself the faster and more elusive runner, but he was a smooth-talking, good-looking type who also happened to have represented our county and country. Talented, yes, but I hated the son of a gun.
Well rescued.
He returned in time for Thursday training, was put straight into the first team for our semi-final, and just before kick-off, the coach had announced that Starman would be taking over the goal-kicking. Fuming does not come close to describing how I felt. He'd abandoned his so-called teammates to our wet, windy and mud-laden winter fairs on our municipal rugby pitch, while he and his admittedly gorgeous girlfriend trotted off to the Antipodes for a sun-kissed season on Wembley-like turf. A fancy Dan. I wasn't even afforded a brief word of explanation in my ear from an apologetic coach. No, here came the conquering hero, less a prodigal son than Odysseus returned.
Very literary.
Look it up.
Yeah.
My teammates rejoicing fairly turned my stomach, says Bill, who's not Bill. We were not favourites to win the semi-final. It was a tense affair until the last 10 minutes of the second half, when I read perfectly a wide pass and intercepted just 20 yards from our try line. I was off and running with a head start, in the clear, up in the middle of the field, and no one was catching me, which is when I diverted towards the corner flag, which would guarantee Mr. New Starman a conversion attempt on the worst side of the field for a left-footed kicker, which he was. It was uphill as well and into the wind.
Excellent. Yes.
I could have gone straight between the sticks, Simon, and guaranteed an easy conversion, which would have put us 2 scores clear. I had plenty of time to glance back and check how closely I was being pursued. I wasn't, but I didn't. I haired away and grounded the ball as close as humanly possible to the corner flag, then turned to accept the acclamation of my teammates for my speedy genius. And indeed, there was an abundance of congratulations for my intuitive and fast-legged intervention. One face, however, regarded me with a more than a quizzical look of suspicion. We had a cup final place on the line, and the only bloke on the field who might have caught me knew precisely what my petty game had been. And so I beg forgiveness, and Simon and the collective, in your conclave, for not for spiting Starman with my most unsporting actions, but for jeopardizing the worthy ambitions and brave-hearted efforts of my teammates, who literally shed blood, sweat, tears and snot to reach a PG certificate.
Okay.
To reach a minor regional cup final. P.S. Yes, Starman coolly slotted home the touchline conversion from his wrong side anyway, winked at me as he returned to his position,
I'll bet.
and indeed kicked us to victory in the final. P.P.S. I still hate him. Anyway, so I thought it would be good to have a rugby confession, what with all the rugby going around at the moment, what with the World Cup.
Correct.
And everything. It was actually completely anonymous. I've called him Bill just because it makes it easier. Sister Holly looking baffled and cross.
I understood, I think, about 75% of that confession. It's just a classic case of the green-eyed monster, isn't it, really? Him just being very jealous of Star Man, the star guy who's scoring all of the amazing tries, and he's just not as good, really. And Bill, you just need to come to terms with that. And maybe if you just practiced a bit more, you'd be a bit better, and you might be better than the Star Man himself. So if you did practice more, then you'd be better. And so that is why I don't forgive.
Even though you didn't understand it.
Oh.
It was definitely a question that, I mean, Starman is clearly better than Bill.
Yeah.
I mean, that is manifestly the case, and has got a gorgeous girlfriend.
Yes, I didn't quite understand why the girlfriend suddenly appeared there.
Yeah,
Bill gave him a really difficult kick into the wind and uphill and all that jazz.
Yeah.
And
did all those things, didn't he? And one might even make the argument that he was doing all those things to make Starman look even better, because he's had this amazing time in Australia with his girlfriend and everything else, and done really well. And what better way to show off how you've been doing well in Australia than kicking into the wind and from the wrong end and in a corner. So therefore, I'm going to perfect use of spite, by the way. Always a big fan of the spite. So yes, going to forgive.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, so it's forgiveness and it's not forgiveness.
Yes.
Matt versus Holly. But it's entirely down to the people's verdict. What would you like to say to Bill? Anyway, that was the confession. The people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Michael in Hull says, totally agree with Matt on this one. If anything, didn't he make Starman look better in the end? Forgiven. But Carl in Bedminster says, not forgiven, Simon. There's no way Bill deserves forgiveness. Where's his sense of sporting pride? A plain and simple case of very sour grapes. And Mitch in Liverpool says, totally forgive this one. I played rugby back in the day, and we all know that one bloke who scores all the tries and is a total show-off and acts like he owns the
A
place.
strutting peacock and a fancy Dan.
Fancy Dan.
I think is what you're talking about. If you have a fancy Dan confession, and maybe how you got your own back, we would love to hear it. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Oh, that was
What a fade.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it was, what's the word? Cacophony. That's the word that I'm looking for. Tonight's confession comes from Mr. P. That's what we're calling him. I'm not quite sure how this is going to go. Anyway, let's find out. Mr. P says, to the hopefully forgiving collective, I need to set the scene and say from the outset, it's not a rant against mothers-in-law. I'm sure there are some nice ones somewhere. However, I digress. My wife and I married young. I was 22 and she was 19 and a half. Her parents didn't approve. My prospective mother-in-law voiced this loud and clear, to the point where we were actually removed from the family circle. So to say my mother-in-law didn't like me is an understatement at the very least. She never made any attempt to cover her feelings that I wasn't good enough for her daughter. She had a point though, and we did run off to get married. It's like something from another
Yeah.
But I reckon holding a grudge is pointless. Many years later, and after many heated arguments, we were all on holiday together. Now, this seems like a very, very unwise thing. Even if you all get on together, don't go on holiday together. Anyway, we're all on holiday together because despite her ladyship and me not getting on, I did get on with my father-in-law, and he adored our kids. However, we fell out over a barbecue in a park in France. She tried to tell me how to do it. I told her she was wrong, but I gave in to what she was saying and did it precisely the way she wanted. I put all the meat on at the same time, and like I told her, it killed the whole thing off. So I told her I was right. I confess I learnt to barbecue because it got me out of the house and away from my mother-in-law, but that isn't this confession, which isn't really from the 1970s, but anyway. Once a meal is eaten, my mother-in-law had an awful habit of picking her teeth. After, she would loudly criticize others for doing it, but it was fine for her. We've all met that particular type. One rule for you, one rule for someone else.
Yeah.
Anyway, once we'd all finished, we were sitting in the sun drinking our wine after this barbecue in France. She seemed to have a particularly stubborn piece. I suppose I should have warned you.
Really? Okay.
A particularly stubborn piece of meat, and asked if anyone had a toothpick. Obviously not, we all said. Dad's got one, said my 7-year-old. It's on his knife. My wife dutifully said that I had insisted on me handing it over. I started to protest, but my mother-in-law started the standard lecture, so I removed it from my knife and I gave it to her and watched her pick her teeth with it, feeling the swelling of joy inside as my mother-in-law chiseled away at her teeth, trying to find a nice little bit of sausage that got stuck in there.
Okay.
You see that toothpick in my Swiss Army knife? Knives from other countries and other militaries
Yes.
are available,
Yeah.
but no one's heard of them.
No.
Was what I used to privately...
Oh no.
It's all right. Pick my toenails with.
Oh. Lovely.
And I never cleaned it afterwards.
No.
I've been doing this for a number of years. The joy I felt was totally immature, but I feel it's her fault for mithering me all those years. I did own up 1 year as to what I'd done, but not to her, just to Mrs. P and the kids, my wife's cousin and her family, who didn't get on with her either, and as many of my friends as I could.
To everyone.
As when my mother-in-law came up in conversation, they couldn't get on with her either.
Good.
So, do I
Right.
need forgiveness? Well, I think I do, probably. Anyway, it's Mr. P's confession. It's a mother. Now, normally a mother-in-law confession, you go, no, don't want to go there because, this is 2023 and all that. But actually, this is actually just a grudge confession, really, from someone who'd been going on and on and on about how you don't pick your teeth, apart from when you do, and here used my Swiss Army knife, which I've been using to clear out all the mess from under my toenails over the years. Disapproving Sister Holly.
No. I hate these sort of things. It's just disgusting. Just disgusting. You've used it on your
From the heart.
on your toe, and then she's using it in her mouth, and you think, oh, that's really funny. That's not funny. That's just gross.
Get it coming?
Oh, sick and wrong, I tell you.
Sick and wrong.
Hate it. Not a fan. Frankly, she was. I know she was difficult, but maybe she was difficult because you and her baby, her young daughter, got married so young, and you took her away, and you got married in secret, and all this stuff, and it's all just coming out now. And hating your mother-in-law, that's a bit mainstream. Like, just no. So not impressed. Not forgiven.
So the things you got wrong, Mr. P. Sick and wrong. So mainstream.
Yeah, you're so mainstream.
Brother from another country.
Well, I'm going to forgive. Number one, if you're in the habit of needing to pick your teeth after every meal, it's probably a good idea to carry around a cocktail stick or a toothpick yourself. Why expecting everyone else to suddenly bring up a stick or a knife or something to be able to help you with your teeth? And also, what a person chooses to do with their own Swiss Army knife in the privacy of their own home is entirely up to them. And if they choose to clean their toenails with them and then offer you to them to put you in the mouth, then that's up on you, sunshine. So, yes, going to forgive.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Mr. P? Yes or no? 61054. Just before the news, the confession from Mr. P was about a problematic relationship with his mother-in-law, and when she wanted to pick her teeth, he lent her his Swiss Army knife with the blade that he cleans his toenails with. It was that kind of confession. The people's verdict is in. What do they say?
Not forgiven, says Sue in Lincolnshire. This is so gross. Any confession involving feet are just wrong. But Tommy says, yes, absolutely forgiven. She got to the nitty-gritty of the situation. And finally, Adam from Lichfield says, not forgiven. Letting her use a toothpick that's been doubling as a toenail pick, that's gross. Mr. P should say 6 Nail Marys. Nail.
Okay, you're obviously impressed with that.
Very.
Thank you very much indeed for the verdicts, and thank you for the confessions. And if you have one and you want to exchange yours for a smart speaker, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's 5:47, confession time. Another smart speaker to give away. Dennis sends in today's tale. I've changed his name again because it says Father Simon, Heavenly Holly, and the bloke at the end of the pew.
Yeah, that's me.
It's me again, your friendly journalist. He's already confessed a few things.
Oh, right. Yes.
In the past. And here he goes again. My first job in journalism was in a city up north, a place I'd not been to before and I knew nothing about. I was totally out of my depth and was considered a bit of a posh lad. My tough northern editor, ex-newspaper shouty type, described me as a soft southerner. He would actually add a few extra swear words to that nickname, but let's move on. Happy days. To toughen me up, he always put me on early morning reporter shifts for the news-based breakfast show. That's how old this confession is. And I absolutely hated it. Starting at 5 a.m., I'd jump into the radio car, always get lost, and always turn up late, and often getting stories totally wrong. It's probably a good job you're not.
Yeah.
For example, once there was a massive fire at a car showroom. When I turned up, I only found one burnt-out car by a garage and not a soul in sight. So I reported live on what was really rather a boring story. My editor phoned me in his usual rage. I was at the wrong place, apparently. Because up the road there was a huge inferno, 6 fire engines attending and dozens of local residents being evacuated due to the thick, acrid smoke, which you could see for miles. Except I couldn't, and I missed it all. Also the time I was sent to report on a new public park opening. Running late as ever, and moments before going on air, I grabbed this very old man with a dog and interviewed him, as the man, not the dog, interviewed him live on air about this tremendous new park. He said the park wasn't new, he'd be coming here for years. Turned out I was at the wrong park.
Okay.
A mile up the road was the actual park I should have been at. Dozens of excited school kids, local councillors, and the local mayor ready to cut the ribbon live on air. What a great vox pop that would have been.
Yeah.
So, my confession is that we're going back to December the 31st, 1999. Millennium Eve. My job was to walk around the city that night and report on the atmosphere of this momentous occasion. I was told to take Wooden Douglas with me. Now, I had assumed that he was a work experience lad that no one liked very much, but it wasn't. Wood and Douglas, for those radio nerds, was actually the name of a heavy radio transmitter carried over the shoulder in order to report in FM quality back to the studio. So, New Year's Eve in any city is carnage, but Millennium Eve was really special. Utter drunken chaos. The streets were packed and every bar was full. Stick a microphone in someone's face, you can be sure whatever they had to say would involve lots of swearing.
Yeah.
It was an impossible task to make any sense of it. I was cold and fed up, and Wooden Douglas was very heavy. So I decided that instead of traipsing around town that night in the rain and being sworn at, I'd go home to my flat, which was quite central, and do everything from there. It was great. All evening, when the radio presenter threw to me live on air, I would go out to the balcony of my flat and tell the world what a brilliant atmosphere there was in the city. With music from my own stereo and the occasional traffic noise below, it sounded really authentic. Like I was in the thick of the action, but I wasn't. I was at home, all warm and dry. My flatmate, who decided to stay in that night to watch TV, helped out too. He would make cheering noises in the background and clinked glasses together. He even agreed to be interviewed at various times about what a great time he was having. He was really convincing each time, putting on a funny accent. He could do a whole vox pop on his own. I was quite proud of my creativity. No one was any the wiser until this moment. And I got to stay at home all night. So, Simon, I seek forgiveness for a few things. Whilst I'm sorry for misleading the audience, I think my version of events was far better and much less sweary. You have to have standards. And I'm also sorry for bailing out early on the shift, but I was, and still am, a soft southerner at heart. Thank you, Simon, and keep up the forgiveness. Well, I mean, it's ingenuity, cleverness, dishonesty, but it was warm and dry. Anyway, Sister Holly looking, I have to say, pretty harsh.
Yeah, not impressed with this one at all, Dennis. Reporting on the millennium is really a once-in-a-lifetime situation, really. You know, that's a really big deal. They trusted you with this to walk around and interview these people, and you couldn't really be bothered to do it. Because let's be honest, that you could have found someone who maybe was jolly but not going to swear on air. I'm sure you could have found someone, but you just couldn't really be bothered to do it. So you thought, I'll just do it at home. And that's not really good enough. So for that reason, not forgiving.
I've never worked with a Wooden Douglas either, so that...
No.
Brother from another gutter.
I mean, some would say he was dishonest. I would say creative. He was being creative when he was trying to find a way of telling this story without having to go out in New Year's Eve crowds. And if we're all honest, and I'm going to be the only one saying this, but we're all thinking it, New Year's Eve is the worst night of the year. It is so underwhelming. Those parties are dreadful parties. It's this sort of law that everyone has to have fun. It's awful. If we could all be in bed by 10:30, well, how happy we'd all
Millennium
be.
Eve, what a waste of time.
Millennium Eve would waste of space. So, yes, definitely going to forgive. For that reason.
Yes, for all those for all those reasons. So, it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Dennis? Yes or not? for his yes or no for his total deception on air as well. I think you have to be harsh, really. Anyway, on the text, please, 61054. Begin your message with Simon. Before the news, on the confession which came from Dennis, another journalism confession, a torrid tale of made-up journalism.
Yes.
And who would possibly ever stoop to that? I mean, no one would ever fake anything.
No.
I don't think. Interesting discussions in the studio.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was all about Millennium Eve, and Dennis did it because he didn't want any sweary types, so he just stayed in his flat and used his flatmate and the stereo and some clinking glasses to reproduce the sounds of Millennium Eve. The people's verdict is in, and here it comes.
And just about everyone's forgiving. Hugo says, forgiven. Being one of those people who worked nearly every New Year's Eve of their career, I totally and utterly forgive the journalists' creative thinking to get the job done. If I could have avoided dealing with the chaos and carnage of that night, I would have. Vicky in Northampton, forgiven. Dennis, totally forgiven. Why do news outlets insist on putting reporters outside dark buildings in the early morning or evening hours anyway, when the updates could just be as effectively done from warm, dry studios? And finally, Tim from Sutton says, of course forgiven, very inventive, especially if he's the same reporter that gave us the 18-stone dog and the 400-metre tall tree.
Yes, he is.
He is.
It's the same guy. I suspect there's a memoir waiting once he's put these all together in a compendium. So your confessions, please, keep them coming, and the best ones get on Monday to Thursday. If we use it, you get a smart speaker, and you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. 5:47. Here we go then. Thursday's confession. Another smart speaker to give away. Actually, I say that, but do I mean it?
Yes.
But do I?
Absolutely.
But do I?
But do I?
You're going to find out whether I...
Oh, I see. Right. Oh, right. Okay.
If I miss out on any confessions, where do I go?
You go to the Greatest Hits Radio app, of course, and you go to Simon Mayo's Daily Confession podcast.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Today's confession comes from Stephen. Good evening, Stephen. Following the lead of the forgiveness shown towards the gentleman sewage worker who managed to elicit CDs in spades from an unsuspecting radio station a few weeks ago, I seek forgiveness from Greatest Hits Radio. Not just the audience, the Supreme Father Simon, the Almighty Matt, Holly the Dispatcher to Hell,
What?
and the Scathing Susie, but the Chief Accountant, who we've never met. This confession gives the opportunity for Greatest Hits Radio to balance the books. Like the sewage specialist, I can see how the size of a radio giant might be a monolith worthy of exploitation, and how multiple Simply Red CDs might be unmissable at someone else's expense. But I have a genuine affection for Greatest Hits Radio, not to be too gratuitously sycophantic. Nevertheless, when opportunity knocks. A year or so ago, there was a confession you read out on the show about winding up TV legend David Vine at Wembley Arena during the Horse of the Year show in the dim and distant 1980s. This is indeed true. I remember that. A scrawny lad, capital S, capital L, might have had something to do with a wink from Harvey Smith and the expletive explosion from Mr. Vine. Well, that scrawny lad, which was the name given, was me. Matt was forgiving.
Obviously.
Thank you. And Susie was in no doubt that the direction of the scrawny lad was not heavenwards. Dispatched to hell. Thank you. Moving into AC/DC territory. Nevertheless, whatever the verdict, a smart speaker was promised. I was not motivated by the promise of a smart speaker to submit my confession, but that simply I had carried around the burden of possibly costing quite a few people their jobs, and I needed absolution. My original confession email had contained my name and address. A week or so after broadcast, I received another email from the offices of Greatest Hits Radio requesting my address for the smart speaker to be sent to. Well, what would you do? I replied confirming the address and reminding the team that my address had been supplied when the original email was sent. Let me put something out there. I have 2 children in their 20s, 2 offspring who are young adults, and let me tell you, also, another fact, I don't like smart speakers. Some conspiracy theorists would say they listen to your conversations and they sneak behind your back to eat cookies and send you advertising you might not want via their friends, namely your phone and computer. That's the smart speaker, not your offspring, I'm sorry.
Obviously.
A smart speaker might be the perfect thing for Gen X offspring for Christmas, but not too welcome under the roof of a dinosaur like me. When a Greatest Hits Radio branded smart speaker arrived, I had an inkling that I could dispatch it via Santa to offspring living far enough away in the bowels of South London that it might struggle to listen to my personal conversations. I think you're paranoid, Stephen. But which of the two offspring should I give the smart speaker to? Much deliberation ensued. Having decided that I could not treat the offspring differently, I resolved to keep the smart speaker as an ornament. It would not be fair to burden one less than the other. After all, parents must burden their offspring equally.
Correct.
And then a Christmas miracle happened. A second Greatest Hits smart speaker arrived. Well, what should I do? Return the second smart speaker with a note saying, "You've been too generous already," with a 50-50 verdict on my confession? Or resume the Santa mission and give each of the Gen X offspring the pleasures of smart speaker living? Well, Santa prevailed, and that is why I need forgiveness. I wantonly exploited Greatest Hits Radio to be a cheapskate at Christmas. Both my kids got smart speakers. So, here's the point. If you read this out, I don't need a smart speaker, as you've already sent it.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, this will help the accountants balance the books in tough times. I would be grateful for a mug, though. Well, I mean, I think that's a little bit. I think that's a little bit risky at the end. A mug. I don't think we're not. That's terrible. We can't go down that line.
No.
No mug for you, Sunny Jim. Is it Sunshine or
Sunshine?
Sunny
Yeah,
Jim.
yeah.
Shumshine.
Shumshine.
Whatever.
Sean Connery.
No, nothing for you, Stephen. I like the fact that he's thinking about our accountant. So we've given him too many speakers, so he's getting another confession on, so we don't have to send him another speaker. However, Sister Holly is looking very serious.
Yeah, it's a really, really difficult one, really, because you could have just come forward and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but you did send me two smart speakers and I don't need two smart speakers." And actually that would have been the honest and best thing to do, because actually if you had said that, I'm sure Susie would have said, "Oh, well, thank you so much for letting us know, but no worries, you can keep the two smart speakers," and there would have been no guilt involved at all, so you wouldn't have been carrying it around. So really for that reason, I'm not forgiving, although you have come forward, so it's a less harsh not forgiven, perhaps.
Either forgiven or not forgiven.
Not forgiven.
Not forgiven. Brother from another gutter.
So I'm going to forgive, because I also know Sister Susie, and I also can guess at what her reaction will be to this, to someone getting two smart speakers when they should have only had one smart speaker. And that is, she is going to hunt you down. She's going to be outside your house, banging on your door, saying, "Where's that other smart speaker, Sunshine?" And the lovely year you've had of having an extra smart speaker, that will be as nothing compared to the rain of hell that Susie's going to bring down on your front door. So, yes, forgiven, because you don't know what's coming.
All right. Finished?
Yeah, now.
61054. Start your message with Simon. It's the People's Verdict. Tonight's confession came from Stephen, and it was basically an admin mistake in this very building, whereby Stephen ended up with two smart speakers rather than one. Did he return it? Did he heck? He kept both. Gave them to his two spoilt children. That's
right.
a bit of editorial.
No evidence there.
No evidence at all. No, absolutely. Anyway, the People's Verdict. Here we go.
So Chris in Cornwall says forgiven. He fessed up in the end and didn't reap the benefits of the speaker for himself. Marie in Twickenham with the retired post, he says forgiven. Send the mug as well for cheek. But Janet in Richmond says not forgiven. Sister Susie is going to be hunting Stephen down. Good luck.
Yes, absolutely.